Hello and welcome to the Forza Show, going a step behind 5. I'm 17. Usually a child's first console would either be the PlayStation 2 or the Dreamcast, but in 2002 my first console I got for Christmas was the PlayStation 1. The very next day, it was the Game Boy Advance. Years later I still got the Game Boy Advance, with the surviving games I got, because most of the good games I had, I lost. But my interests today are the Game Boy games, which I will always pick over the Sega Game Gear, even though I didn't own that. But what games are my favorite? What games could I have got, but I didn't get? Only two games on the list that I've still got to this day. The other two I went online to play. This is the top 4 Game Boy games. At number 4 is Castlevania 2 for the Game Boy. The first time I played the Castlevania game was the first one for the Game Boy Advance NES Classics, and it was tough as nails, to the point where I sold it, which I deeply regret. It's probably the only Castlevania game I played, or even owned actually, and a demo of one of them from the PlayStation Store called Castlevania Harmony of Despair. I did not like the game one bit. Why? Because you can't see the character. I mean, I had to move closer to the screen just to see the sprite, but that's for another day. Then I tried out two Castlevania games on Game Boy. The first one was crap, but the sequel was great. It captures the true spirit of Castlevania, like the castle designs, the enemies, the bosses, the fact that when you die, it's your fault, which is why the first one was terrible. It has good controls, great graphics for the Game Boy, and it was still tough as nails, but here I can appreciate it more. It's simple Castlevania, and I hope to play more of the games in the future. Our number 3 is Kirby's Dream Land. Just look at this adorable pink fluffy thing, whatever hell it is, called Kirby. For 20 years he's been giving us nice simple games that are still enjoyable to this day, even though the newer games are easy as hell. Thankfully, you could get some of the major retro Kirby games on the Wii very soon, which is what I really want to get, hopefully. But let's look at the first game that will be in the collection, Kirby's Dream Land. You're probably wondering why he's white instead of pink. Maybe because the fact that the Game Boy was in black and white, but then again everything else was in colour in the background of the cover. Well, as a basic Kirby game, it's fun and replayable. In the game, Kirby has the ability to inhale enemies but can't take their powers. Remember, this is the first game, so don't complain about it. It got two sequels, then the almighty Kirby Adventure, probably my favourite Kirby game so far. It's got your great Game Boy graphics, good controls, and it's a fun and colourful game. Well, not really colourful. But then again, Kirby's Adventure is dull in terms of colours, but the Game Boy Advance remake shows its true colours. Apologies for the filler, but it's very interesting, right? Number 2 is Tetris. In Soviet Russia, the blocks drop on you. A game created by a Russian about basically falling blocks has not only become one of the most innovative but the most legendary games of its time, and even the Game Boy console with the game bundled with made it recognizable. Yes, there's an NES version of the same title and even an unlicensed version of the game, but it's the Game Boy version that dominated them all. The goal is to chop different shaped blocks and make in lines to make space for new blocks, whilst getting high scores. It's as simple as that. Although many companies have tried to give it a 21st century look, but it'll always be the Game Boy Tetris for me. But if you can't find it, then sign up to Tetris Friends, where you can play Tetris with other people around the world. You can even play the original Tetris online. But if you have a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Advance, you best find this game, or you turn into a block yourself. Meh. And the number 1 best Game Boy game is Super Mario Land. Come on, you know that was going to happen. There was a time where I had a Game Boy Advance, and I still got it. The first game I got for it was Finding Nemo. I remember playing it, but looking back at it now, it's very repetitive. But while I had that game, there was another game I got at my mum's friend's house. I was given what was to be one of my favorite Game Boy games of all time, Super Mario Land. At the time, I had a little knowledge about Mario, and this half helped. The story is very different from the normal games, and is set in another kingdom called something Land, and the ruler there is Princess Daisy, not Peach. But then she gets kidnapped by an alien, which is kind of weird considering this is the villain's only appearance, and yes, it's canon to the Mario universe. But let's talk about the gameplay. It's just like the original Super Mario Bros. But handheld. In terms of gameplay, nothing's actually changed. The controls are like the other 2D Mario games, so nothing's changed. Yes, the setting has changed. The villains are, well, you still got the Goombas, but they look like monsters from Pokemon. Some Koopa Troopers that explode if you jump on them. That's awkward. And yes, there are only 4 worlds, or lands, hence the title, which means it's shorter than the other Mario games, maybe because 8 lands are too much for our Game Boy cartridge. But it's fun, never repetitive, simple, and the music is great, just like the Super Mario Bros. Music, which are all memorable, including this. Anyone who owns a Game Boy Color or Advance, this game is worth buying, and is a game I will keep forever. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.